Zaria Shahab, the daughter of a famous scientist, is on a mission to escape the military society created 20 years after the incident, a nuclear reactor meltdown at the Alcazar Research Center and reactor plant. Since then, civilization has been destroyed and the contaminated zone has been walled off. A group of armed forces have taken over the area and have deployed many military droids, which Zaria's father firmly stood against. These forces have enforced a law that is threatening the future of the survivors. Procreation is considered a civil violation because it is seen as a blatant neglect of prosperity in the community. Those found violating the law are taken as a subject to Alcazar, never to be seen again. Zaria is an orphan with no relatives, and her childhood was ruined after her father passed away, and she had to fend for herself to survive. She is pretty smart and knows her way around computers and droids thanks to her father. She has found a way to escape the area. She wants to use the droid created by her father and find a way out of these oppressions that keep everyone against their will. But this droid has not been active for nearly 20 years and is missing the necessary software to make it active. At the beginning of the film, Zaria is seen trying to download firmware, a program embedded in the droids to help them operate, from a droid that has its head removed after being hung upside down from a tree. She was the one who killed the drone. She has to hurry up because the droid belongs to the armed forces, who have narrowed its location to the area where they lost contact with it. 4 armed men with another military droid are approaching her position quickly. She was almost there, but the download got stuck at 99%. Luckily, the armed men didn't want to shoot her on sight. While they were holding their position, Zaria's download was completed and she started running. The men pursued her without firing at her, trying to cut her off with another force approaching from the other side, but she reached a very narrow opening between 2 walls and passed through it. The men couldn't follow her, but the droid managed to fit in after dropping its package. The droid pursues her and she almost gets caught, but escapes after going over a wall. The droid tried to replicate her movements, but failed. After completing her detailed execution, Zaria is on her way to her father's research workshop, where the droid lies dormant. Since her father worked at the Alcaraz nuclear facility, his room was located in the most dangerous place. She puts the device she used to download the malware in her backpack and sneaks into a compound. While she was carefully moving around, she met an old man who lost someone to the armed forces. He is not happy to see her sneaking around these treacherous areas, but he is happy that she found what she was looking for. She promises that once she escapes, she will let the world know about what is happening and come back to save all the people. He told her father would be proud of her and pointed her to an area behind fence 25 where she could sneak out without being detected. Meanwhile, the armed forces are searching for people who have violated the law about procreation. They are performing a door-to-door search using their droids, who are knocking on doors asking the survivors to comply for a wellness check. The people are disgusted with the actions of the armed men, who are seen detaining those in violation of their cardinal law. These men are seen dragging a woman who had a child on the floor while the woman is trying to resist their arrest. Zaria walks among the armed men as if nothing happened and manages to get past some of them without alerting anyone. 2 members of the armed forces are seen talking to each other about the increasing number of test subjects for a mysterious operation in Alcatraz. Their leader, the commander, is getting desperate and wants more people to be caught. Zaria was almost seen by these 2, but their attention was elsewhere. Their detainee tried to escape from them, and one of them shot with a taser gun, which ended up taking the detainee's life because of the high voltage. Zaria gets past these 2 barely, but she gets caught near a checkpoint. Zaria was no match for a truck, an armed soldier, and a droid who ordered her to move to the checkpoint. The checkpoint was the end of the quarantine zone and an entrance to a radiation-affected area. She shows her identification to the officer at the checkpoint, and he asks the reason for leaving the quarantine zone. She tells him she is looking for some provisions, and when he asks her what is in her backpack, she tells him it is food and water. She gets cleared after she promises to come back before curfew. But Zaria's trouble was far from over. When she was about to pass the checkpoint, one of the armed forces' droids detected a lie in her voice and detained her. She is taken to a fenced area where detainees are searched for illegal matters and forced to surrender her backpack. When her backpack was searched by an armed man, a grenade and a handgun were found in it. This was a good enough reason to take her to Alcazar. a place where she would disappear like the rest of the people taken there. But when the droid takes out the device containing the firmware and puts it on a table, Zaria takes action. She takes the device with one hand and holds the grenade with the other. This was a complete surprise for the men. They didn't expect a girl to pull this kind of move. Zaria was determined not to let anyone intimidate her. Although everyone quickly points their gun at her, she tells them she has nothing to lose and will take everyone with her. While Zaria is in a standoff with the armed soldiers who are trying to get her to drop the grenade, pointing their weapons against her, the commander calls the checkpoint and gets informed about the situation by a man named Ivan. He gives the order to shoot her despite being told about the collateral damage. The commander was only concerned about the probability of an escape. Ivan had no choice but to comply. When he was about to shoot her, Zaria pulled the pin and threw the grenade into flammable chemical gases. Then she hid behind a concrete block. The resulting explosion killed the two armed men standing near the chemicals and destroyed the droid that caught Zaria. Ivan, who was not injured because he was far from the explosion, fired some shots at Zaria, who was in shock because of the effects of the explosion. She didn't get hit because she kept moving, even after she suffered temporary deafness. Zaria was about to lose her balance, but she took control of herself and kept running. After reaching her father's workshop, she plugs the device into her father's droid and begins to write some code on the computer located near the droid. While she was writing the code, some newspapers were seen on the walls. One of the newspapers was about her father's calling out for more stringent regulations on military tech, and the other was about the incident. Although the nuclear research was seen to be detrimental after one of the reactors melted down, for some reason, the commander didn't want to stop it. Instead, he is taking more and more people to be subjects of the mysterious study. Zaria completed writing the code and turned on the droid. Since the droid was an old military droid, she didn't know what to expect, so she grabbed a bat and prepared herself for an attack that may come from the droid. At first, the droid had a red indicator, similar to the ones that belonged to the armed men. Then, it stood up and walked in Zaria's direction. Although it seemed to approach her aggressively, the droid was back to its original setting. Its indicator changed to green, and after greeting Zaria by calling her name, it described the last time it was active perfectly. She was delighted to get the droid working, but she had no time to waste. She gives the droid an assault rifle and tells him they are going to shoot their way out. More troops were deployed, and after the event at the checkpoint, security is going to be tighter than ever. All of a sudden, the droid told Zaria the complete opposite of what she wanted to hear. He informed her that he was programmed for companionship and not violence. This didn't make sense. He was supposed to be a military droid. The droid explains that her father created him with no aggression protocol. She was angry because all of her efforts were for nothing. Although this droid saved her life from the reactor in the past, now it was going to be a liability. The droid's primary mandate was going to protect her, so he tells her about an idea that may not involve aggression. The droid's security data is very outdated for the current system in place, but it still could access the older border outposts' analog system. They are manual gate controls requiring physical passcodes. This was not a sure thing, and the numbers didn't support it, but the droid, influenced by his companionship protocol, suggested hoping for the best. An irradiated orphan and pacifist war droid were on their way to face the dangers. On their way, Zaria is seen having fun with the droid, who finds it hard to reciprocate the excitement she shows. After all, it was not human. After traveling for many days and nights, they reach Outpost 1. It was a place with a fence on top and some kind of tunnel on the ground. As they were passing through the tunnel, Zaria got excited when she saw a lot of gas masks on the ground and cross, marking the place as a graveyard. But her excitement didn't last long. She accidentally tripped a wire, which triggered a flare that was fired into the sky. The security system detected the breach and began announcing the breach, describing the designated area accurately. Soon, the place was going to be crawling with the armed forces and their droids. Zaria and her droid quickly rushed to the gate of the outpost. The droid tried to open the doors, and for a moment, it seemed to have worked, but it got stuck right after it started opening. The droid tried different codes multiple times times, but instead of getting open, the gate started to close down. The armed men arrived at the place where the flare was fired and started searching for her. When the droid saw the gate was closing no matter what, it held the gate until Zaria could pass. The armed men arrived at the scene and saw Zaria's escape attempt with the droid. Now that she was going to escape to the outside world, they didn't want to take her alive. Instead, they began firing at will. Zaria managed to get outside, but the droid was stuck when it could not hold the gate due to constant shots that were being fired at it. Half of its body was outside, and the other half was inside. Zaria tried to lift the gate, but didn't have the strength to hold it. When the droid realizes that it is not going to make it out, it tells Zaria to leave, claiming it has fulfilled its primary mandate. Zaria didn't want to let go, but the droid told her to run and not to come back. It took out the device she plugged into it and shouted, "Run!" She quickly began running with the firmware device in her hand while the drone shut down. The armed men couldn't do anything but stand down while the gate closed, cutting the droid in half. Zaria is outside of the wall, and after she takes a moment to look at the only thing she has in her position, she continues her journey. After several days, Zaria arrived at a military base. A female officer of the army is communicating with her superior about her. She tells her superior that the girl has arrived with a device with some sort of droid software. The female officer is informed that the survivors have been trapped inside the wall ever since the incident. She gives the order to mobilize a team, and they get ready for an attack. The female military officer asks Zaria for help, and Zaria responds with the saying of the droid that sacrificed itself for her, saying it is her primary mandate to do so. At the end of the movie, reports about Zaria's escape are heard over the radio.